Welcome to the Week 3 breakdowns for the Dana White Contender Series. No UFC this week, but luckily the Contender Series is able to fill our cup. But also, there is an LFA card later on this week, which I will be dropping an MMALOTN bonus episode for. But if you want written breakdowns earlier for that card, you can find that on the MMALOTN Patreon page. The other Patreon page, that I have available for you guys that you guys will find very resourceful is the MMA Fight Archive, which is where I was able to study up on all these fighters I'm about to break down for you guys, but also have the ability to study up on 17 different promotions from all over the world with the entire 2024 schedule already posted and available to you guys. Check it out. You know, just kicking off September alone, we got Aries FC, A1 Combat, Cage Warriors, OKTAGON, Bellator, ACA. The following week, we got LFA, Bellator, KSW, and then again, pretty much the entire schedule is up there for you guys to check out. I add fighter profiles on a daily basis. We just surpassed 4,100 fighter profiles available there for you guys. So if you want to check it out for free with a 7-day free trial, see what all the hoopla is about, see why there's over 90 subscribers currently on the service as well, check out the link in the description below. That is the MMA Fight Archive. All right. This week, we're going to be going over Week 3, like I was stated a little bit earlier. It's been a favorite heavy season thus far with the Contender Series. To the first 2 weeks, favorites are 9-1. The only underdog to come through is Rami Hamed, who was able to get that victory over Ming Deng. I believe that was back in Week 1, but favorites swept the board last week. Let's see if they can do it again. Although I do believe there are a couple underdogs that could make things a little bit harder for the favorites. Let's see if they're actually able to cash tickets for us this weekend. Or this week. I'm so used to saying weekend, but obviously Tuesday nights, it's always the best night, especially at this time of the year. All right, so let's not waste any time. We got 5 fights to break down for this card, so let's try to get through it as thoroughly as possible. First fight of the night, we got Jack Duffy coming in at plus 245 going up against Nick Piccininni coming in at minus 285. Now, this is a battle between two grapplers, although on the Duffy side, he is more so reliant on his BJJ black belt. On the flip side for Piccininni, tremendous collegiate wrestler. I believe he's a 3-time D1 All-American, a 4-time Big 12 champion as well. Started his career up there in San Jose under the tutelage of Daniel Cormier and the American Kickboxing Academy, but over the last year and a half or so, I believe he moved down to Dallas, Texas to train alongside the Fortis MMA crew, but he had a couple of his buddies from California come down with him, most notably Kyle Crutchmer, Bellator fighter. But Piccininni has the goods. This guy's a very solid wrestler. Obviously does very good in scrambles. His striking is coming along very well. You can see that when he's throwing his 1-2s down the pipe. He has been cracked, although his durability looks very good. He's a very solid fighter, and I completely understand why he is the minus 285 favorite in this matchup. On the flip side for Jack Duffy, this is a guy who started his career way back in 2012, but has only managed to accrue a 7-0 record in that time. The main cause? This guy had a very bad drug addiction, which he is now 4 years sober of. You can hear Faber actually talking about him in some of his matchups, as the majority of Duffy's fights recently have taken place under the A1 Combat banner. But he talked about how Duffy started his MMA training alongside the likes of Andre Fili, who has a long and tenured career in the UFC already. Had Duffy not been derailed by these drug issues, he probably would find himself there as well, especially considering the type of talent that he brings to the cage. But he is, like I said, 4 years clean now. He's managed to get in 2 fights, 2 dominant wins, although he was rocked and dropped a few times in that first victory. He showcases why he's so good because of his control, his ability to get opponents to the ground, and even his ability to take the back of his opponents and maybe not find the finish, but he's still able to control it and land some decent damage while doing so. Obviously, there's going to be a very good scramble fest between these two, but I believe the wrestling is going to be the trump factor here for Piccininni, who I believe will be able to dictate the pace and probably get out in front of some of these scrambles that Duffy will try to be competitive in. Minus 285 is a little bit wide for me, as I do believe Duffy is a live underdog in this spot, but not so much to the point that I think he's going to be able to pull off the upset here. Piccininni has dedicated his life to being a stellar athlete and a standout wrestler, whereas Duffy has been derailed at times, and he might have all of his ducks in a row at this moment, but I believe just the overall mentality of Piccininni, but most importantly, his wrestling edge here should give him the advantage. The over 1.5 is the most intriguing aspect to this fight for me. I believe it's roughly around -170, -180. I think Duffy's going to be tough to put away. Piccininni is a finisher, finishing 5 of his 6 matchups, 2 of them by rear naked choke, 3 of them by arm triangle choke. But I think Duffy will have the defenses fully ready to go to deal with that submission heavy onslaught from Piccininni, if that's where he looks to bring to the table. So I will go Piccininni by decision, but the over 1.5 is probably where I would put my money over the chalky Piccininni price. Next up, we got Malcolm Wellmaker coming in at -240, going up against Adam Bramhald, who comes in at +205. Now, there's been a tremendous amount of line movement on this matchup over the last 24 hours, as Bramhald was actually closer to +120 yesterday. He now finds himself at +205, and I don't know if that has to do with the fact that he was the last one to make it to the scales this morning for the weigh-ins, or just people love Wellmaker and they wanted to go to the well, no pun intended, and just try to continuously rebet him up to a point that they don't feel is bettable anymore. Wellmaker doesn't stand out to me so much in terms of being super special at one thing. He's often facing guys that want to take him to the ground and try to keep him away from his striking there, but he does a good job in terms of utilizing his defensive grappling to keep fights upright and then start butchering guys on the feet and even knocking some of them out. Trains out of a little known gym in the state of Georgia. I think it's Faglier Gym or something like that. Haven't really heard of that gym in the past. He's well-rounded, but again, nothing super special. And, you know, there must be something in his game that makes him so good, because through his amateur and pro career, he's managed to put together a 16-1 record. But I believe that the opponents that he's been facing on the pro scene have been able to allow him to be so effective and be successful. On the flip side for Bramhald, you can kind of say the same thing in terms of the level of opponents he's been going up against. You know, he did have a layoff roughly of 2 years between 2021 and 2023 due to an injury that he suffered in the fight back in 2021 where he won the title. Apparently he had some nerve damage in his leg that completely messed everything up. He even had an opportunity to jump in on short notice on a UFC card in March of 2022 against Nathaniel Wood, but unfortunately was unable to take the fight because of the damage that he suffered to his leg. Thus, he took off a bunch of time, tried to get himself ready. He did not want to fight compromised at all. And then eventually he made his return back in 2023, where he was able to successfully defend his title. And I believe he won that fight by decision against a Muay Thai specialist, and he outstruck the Muay Thai specialist. He got hit a few times, but nothing too crazy. He was able to stay in that fight, land with some solid consistency and volume, and end up picking up the decision victory there. He has very solid Muay Thai chops of his own, and he also has a slick jiu-jitsu game as well, especially with that front choke series and the anacondas. This is a closer fight than the odds indicate. You know, I think it was more correct when we saw the line closer to +120 for Bramhald, but I think it's just way out of whack now, and at +205, there could be some value on Bramhald to come through. Again, it's tough to really say how good either of these guys are, considering the level of opponents that they face on the regional scene, and they weren't complete bums that they were facing, but there were guys that allowed these guys to just go out there and take advantage of some of the weaknesses that they had in their game and be as successful as they were. I think Bramhald can be successful in the striking realm here. Wellmaker might have a little bit of a speed advantage, but I don't think he has this crazy knockout power that Bramhald has to worry too much about. There are some striking defense issues in Bramhald's game, but I don't know if it's going to be to the point that Wellmaker will make it look like a -240 performance. So I'm actually going to lean ever so slightly to the underdog here, and then the odds just make it a little bit better here to take a shot on him. Sometimes you got to play the odds. It is what it is. There are times where I'll, even if the odds aren't where I think they are, I'll still take advantage of that spot. Like even on the flip side, if a favorite is too big of a favorite, I'd still take advantage of it. But I don't feel so strongly about Wellmaker in this spot. I do still lean Bramhald. I think this will become a competitive striking matchup, and I think we'll see Bramhald come out on top, and I think it comes by decision. All right, next up we got Marco Tulio coming in at -365. coming into his second Dana White Contender Series appearance, going up against Matthew Duclos, who comes in at plus 290. Now, start off on Tulio, who last time around picked up a big win over, I can't remember the kid's name, but it was a training partner of Alex Pereira, a guy that Pereira actually beat on the kickboxing scene, and then that guy decided to come over to share his gym and start training with Pereira and those guys. Long, lanky striker, but Tulio was able to hurt him on numerous occasions in that matchup, but was unable to put him away. We saw Tulio lean on his wrestling a little bit and his grappling to really assert his dominance in that matchup. And unfortunately for him, Dana was not a fan of that performance, and ultimately Tulio had to go back to the regional scene, pick up another win on the regional scene, getting a second round finish over a tomato can of a fighter, and now he gets his second opportunity here. Tulio is a power puncher who's rounding out the rest of his game with solid grappling and good jiu-jitsu, as you would expect, as he trains out of the same camp as Charles Oliveira. I think he's a very solid fighter, and he would be a great addition to the UFC roster if he's able to get signed this weekend, but I think we're going to see him come out a little bit like a bat out of hell, trying to get the finish to try to get Dana White's acceptance here to finally get signed to the UFC. He's going up against a game Frenchman here in Duclos, who does a very good job in terms of implementing his striking heavy approach as well. He's riding a 4-fight winning streak after suffering a TKO loss back in mid-2022 in Bellator, and that was a fight where I felt that the referee was a little bit unfair to him. Earlier in that first round, Duclos was able to hurt his opponent very badly, dropped him, followed up with some big shots, but the referee let the fight play out a little bit. Later on in that round, his opponent was able to land a big shot on him, clearly wobbled him. Duclos was still on his feet, gets hit again, gets wobbled again, and I thought he could have let that fight go on a little bit more to let Duclos try to battle back into the fight, just as the referee had allowed his opponent to battle back in the fight. But for some reason, the referee ended up stepping in and robbing Duclos of that opportunity. But Duclos has managed to put together 4 straight victories since then, although his last one is a little bit weird, considering that it was a spot where he was defending a takedown and he was really pushing his opponent's head onto the ground, and it seemed like it caused some damage on the eye of his opponent. And as soon as that grappling exchange was over with, his opponent gets up, points at his eye, and the referee stops the fight immediately. And there was no eye poke, so I kind of understand it was more so TKO via mat to the eye. But regardless, it's a win for Duclos, shows off his takedown defense, and ends up still picking up the victory. But he has some clean, crisp striking, and he has some stinging power as well, which is why it's a little bit weird for me to try to back Tulio as such a big favorite in this matchup. He is clearly the better fighter, without a doubt. But at middleweight and above, you have to respect the knockout power that a lot of guys bring to the table, especially when they have a background in striking, just as we see from Duclos. I think the under 1.5 would probably be the best way to play this matchup, around -150, considering we're going to see Tulio likely look for the finish earlier, and that could open up to him to potentially getting finished as well. Duclos by knockout at +800 is worth a little bit of a hedge spot if you are looking to parlay Tulio, which I wouldn't completely blame you for. He is the better mixed martial artist here, and if I was him, I would look to take this to the ground immediately and try to implement his BJJ heavy approach. That would be the best path to victory here. But if there is exchanges on the feet, Duclos has the power to cause Tulio some issues here. But I do think Tulio is the much better fighter here. So I'm going to go Tulio by knockout. Maybe even consider a submission prop again. That would be the path of least resistance. But the under 1.5 is probably the best spot. And again, small hedge on Duclos by knockout at +800 would not be a bad way to tackle this fight either. But Tulio should win this convincingly and end up getting signed to the UFC. All right, next up, this one was the one that kind of had me scratching my head in terms of the line movement here. So we got Malcolm Aswell coming in at -130, going up against Bogdan Grad, who comes in at +110. Now, when I started researching this matchup, Grad was actually -125, and by the time I finished the following matchup research, I looked back at the odds, and he was down to that +100, +105 range. So there's clearly been action coming in on Aswell. It seems to be kind of tapering off around Grad +110, +100. So it might be that Aswell ends up closing as a slight favorite here around -120 to -130, but very, very intriguing matchup. So start off on the Michael Aswell side of things, who comes in as the current Fury FC featherweight champion. And this guy is basic, and I do not mean that with insult at all. I mean, he is basic in terms of just Pressure is the big thing in his game. He likes to move forward a lot, but he sticks to the basics with his striking, his jab, his cross, his hook. He doesn't change it up too much. He doesn't throw many kicks. He doesn't look to grapple more often than not. It's his opponents looking to take fights to the ground. But he is a guy that likes to apply pressure and slowly chip away and break his opponents. Almost a Billy Quarantillo-like approach, but I think that he has a better grasp on the basics in terms of striking than Billy Q. And he has good enough durability to kind of back it up. You know, the one fight that he lost to Yadier Delval, I believe was the kid's name, that was a fight where he got taken down from the jump, got controlled the entire first round with Delval on his back. In the second round, Aswell was starting to take over the momentum, pretty much won about 3.5 to 4 minutes of that round, walking Delval down, landing some, you know, not huge shots, but clearly landing more output and landing more damage. But then the last minute to minute and a half, we saw Delval really start to bite down in his mouthpiece, and he start to walk Aswell down, landing big shots of his own, which probably leaned the judges to go back to Delval to win that second round, ultimately going on to win the decision that night. And that's where the big holdup with Aswell comes. He is a life sucker in a sense that he wants to just drain your gas tank, walk you down, and then break you late. But if he's going up against an opponent that can be very effective early with landing bigger and more eye-catching shots, you know, it's going to be easy to overcome that pressure style that Aswell brings to the table. And unfortunately for him, I think he's fighting a guy in Bogdan Grad who can do exactly that. Now, I was a little bit high on Grad in his Dana White Contender Series performance, or leading up to his Dana White Contender Series fight last time around, and he ended up getting dummied by Tom Nolan and finished within 90 seconds. That was a matchup where he was struggling to deal with the no-man zone and trying to crash the pocket against a much bigger, much longer, much more powerful Tom Nolan. And we saw him get hurt numerous times and eventually get put out, like I said, less than 90 seconds into that matchup. After that, he decided to change weight classes so that he doesn't have to deal with that type of, size disadvantage again. And now he finds himself at 145 pounds, where he has managed to put together back-to-back victories, finishing both of his opponents. Now, I am not a huge fan of his the amount of time that he kind of gives off of his back at times, but with his BJJ brown belt, he does a good job in terms of finding those moments and capitalizing on those moments to either pull off a submission or pull off a reversal. I love that he immediately looks to get his feet on the hips of his opponents if he's on his back, because that creates opportunity for him to swivel his hips and either pull up an armbar or a triangle, or to at least pull off a reversal, push his opponents off of him and try to get back to his feet, and then get back to his power striking approach, which is what he's very successful with more often than not. He's explosive, he's fast, he's powerful. This kid has all the talent in the world, in my opinion. Keeping an eye on his durability is going to be something to just monitor. His cardio obviously has a lot of early explosions, a lot of movements that he just powers through. That could potentially hinder him later on in matchups against guys like Aswell that could potentially take this deep and suck the energy dry of of Bogdan Grad with that pressure style that he brings to the table. But I think we're going to see enough success early from Grad here to outweigh the forward movement pressure of Aswell. I think the speed and athleticism of advantage of Grad will allow him to land the better shots here, maybe even find a finish, possible club and sub finish. You can get Grad, again, BJJ brown belt, by submission at plus 700, which I think is a great line here. We know Aswell has great durability, but if he gets hurt, wobbled a bit, maybe we see Grad go to the grappling and try to get a submission to try to put him away emphatically here. I like the plus money on Grad in this spot. I think he can do a good enough job in terms of putting Aswell, or at least thwarting Aswell's forward pressure with big shots of his own, and then potentially finding a club and sub opportunity. Aswell round 3 may not be a bad way to approach this fight in case there is issues with Grad's gas tank later on in this matchup, but I think the athleticism advantage, the power, the explosiveness, those physical things for Grad should allow him to get the better shots off here against Aswell early, and then eventually find either a club and drum or a club and sub performance for himself to notch that victory and hopefully a contract to the UFC. All right, main event for week 3 is going to be between Andre Pulyaev coming in at plus 145, going up against Liam Anderson, who comes in at minus 170. Now, not often do we see Russian prospects from the Shlemenko fight team get an opportunity in the UFC, let alone in the Contender Series. But here we have Andre Pulyaev trying to lead the charge for that team. And for those of you not familiar with Alexander Shlemenko, he was the former Bellator middleweight champion, very entertaining striker, a lot of spinning moves, a lot of spinning back kicks. Very entertaining with his style, very dominant for a very long time, and now he's obviously a full-time coach looking to bring the next crop of Russian fighters to the big shows. They're doing great over there on the Russian scene. A lot of his guys are striking base, and that's what you see from Pulyaev as well, although I don't know if he has a pure power to be so effective with it, especially at this level of the mixed martial arts game. Some of the guys that he's been beating are kind of schmuck-ish. Some of the guys that he's been catching in submissions, he's been easily taken down in the past and controlled for a little bit, but he has shown some decent submissions off of his back, some good reversals as well, good fight IQ decisions in the fight. Like I saw one fight where I believe it was the Kondratev fight, where it looks like he's kind of slowing down in the striking realm in the second and third rounds, so he's deciding to go to the grappling, and he was falling short in some of those spots in terms of completing the takedowns, but he would just reset and find another entry and then eventually get the fight to the ground, which he ended up, I believe, winning by armbar. I could be wrong on the submission there, but I know he got a submission with just about a minute or so left in that fight. He's a solid fighter. He's an entertaining fighter, good striker, starting to round out the rest of his game. But I think Liam Anderson has the edge in most aspects of this fight. Pulyaev could likely, or is definitely the better striker, but I don't think so much so to the point that Anderson can't be effective in his own right in that realm. But I think where Anderson will have the advantage is when he's able to utilize, I think he's a brown belt or a black belt by now, but he is a guy that will be able to take fights to the ground and dominate opponents from there. We've seen him catch subs against much more dangerous opponents, in my opinion. Okay, maybe that's a stretch. I know Jay Manning was a very highly touted prospect when Liam Anderson, I believe he pulled off the upset that night and submitted him. But that just goes to show, like, this guy can take guys down, dominate them on the mat, and then eventually find submissions. And then seeing that head kick KO that he had in his last fight, you see that he's really rounding out the rest of his game. Both of these guys are long and lanky middleweight. I believe it's middleweights or welterweights. You know what? Let me just quickly confirm that. I don't know why I'm trying to guess here for you guys, because you guys are coming here for the actual information. I should have wrote that down. I apologize. Middleweights, long, lanky middleweights. I believe Pulyaev has a slight height and reach advantage, but I don't think it's going to be a big difference maker here. But I do think that Anderson can eventually drag this fight to the ground where he's going to have a little bit more success, and I think that will even open up submission opportunities for him. Minus 180 is like on the back or the high end of how much I would actually pay on Anderson. I saw a couple bookies have him down at minus 170. I'm hoping on fight day that we'll see a little bit of love come in for the Russian, just because he is Russian. We always get that Russian tax at times, and that could bring Anderson down closer to minus 150. And if he gets there, that's likely where I'll end up pulling the trigger, just enough to win a unit, maybe take a little bit of a sprinkle on his submission prop as well. But this is a fun fight. This is a great fight, but I think at the end of the day, Anderson will end up being the better fighter overall, and hopefully that leads to a submission victory for the BJJ specialist, and hopefully a UFC contract. There you guys go. Breakdowns for week 3 of the Contender Series. We also have the LFA going down later on this week, going down in Brazil. So it's a Brazil heavy card. I will drop a MMALOTN bonus episode for you guys, probably Wednesday or Thursday, so keep your eyes peeled for that, probably closer to Thursday. So if you want actions for LFA, that's where you'll be able to find it. All right, I guess I will see you guys then. Peace.